Okay, when you get your pre-built kit, you want to notice that there's also a layer of shrink wrap mylar that's already on the cork and on the reel seat. I know that you're going to be anxious to tear this off and grab this cork with your bare hands, but leave it on there because in case you have dirty hands or you get a drip of varnish or epoxy on here, it's not going to ruin this. So keep this on until you're done building your rod. Then you can take it off, christen it with maybe a glass of scotch or a cold beer or soda, and you'll be done. Okay, the first thing you want to do when you get your blank is you want to make sure that it's clean. And the way that you clean it is with isopropyl alcohol or IPA or denatured alcohol, which you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. You just want to put that on a paper towel and you want to make sure that you clean the entire blank, including all the way down to the ferrule and the ferrule edge, and just make sure that the whole thing is very, very clean. The reason for that is when you eventually put on your varnish or your epoxy, if there's any kind of oil from your fingers or any kind of residue left on the blank, the epoxy or the varnish is not going to want to stick. It's going to want to lift, and you're not going to get a good finish. So always try to work as clean as you can. All the fiberglass blanks that are in your kit have what's called a spigot ferrule. And a spigot ferrule means that there's actually a piece of fiberglass that's inserted into the butt section of the blank, and then there's this other spigot that's actually stepped down, and that piece of the ferrule goes into the other piece of the blank. It's okay that there's a gap. You want to have a gap because when the rod will flex, these two pieces here are not going to meet. You're going to have a little bit of a gap in there that will allow it to flex. Now the important thing I want to show you is when you put these together, what you want to do is put them together side by side and get an idea of how long this ferrule is in relation to this piece. This is called the female end. Okay? So in this case, when I butt these two together, this blank here goes that far. Now when I actually put it together, it doesn't really go that far. It goes a little bit shorter because we have a gap in here, but that's okay. So when I butt these together, that distance right there is the distance that you definitely want to put your guide, which would be this type of guide, which is a single foot guide, or if it's a double footed guide like this, you'd put that double foot guide here. The important thing to understand is that you want to make sure that you have a thread wrap that goes the whole length of this ferrule, because that thread wrap is going to give you extra strength so that when this part of the ferrule is pushing on that wall, it won't break. If you only put your guide on like this and you left all this section exposed, you could have a failure. So you want to make sure that this whole area is actually completely wrapped with thread. So in this case, your guide would be way out here and this whole thing would be supported with thread and epoxy. Just to further expand on what I'm trying to explain to you, on the white fiberglass you can actually see through the fiberglass blank itself, and you can see where the end of the blank is. You can do this in your own shop and see. Again, you want to make sure that you always wrap all of this section here with thread. And then if you attach your guide, you want to make sure your guide is certainly past that point right there. Okay, in your kit you're going to receive two different decals. One is the Beaver Meadow glass decal, and the other one is the J.P. Ross crest. I'm going to show you a trick on attaching these to the blank. The first thing is you're going to put on your J.P. Ross crest. What you want to do is make sure obviously that the area is clean. We're going to clean that with alcohol. Just make sure that that's very, very clean, and certainly that it's very dry. You also may want to use a lint-free cloth so that you have absolutely no chance of getting any kind of debris or anything on the blank. You're going to grab your decal, and I'm just going to do this with my hands because I've got everything clean. We should be okay. You're going to add your decal onto your blank, and just make sure that this edge right here is completely perpendicular to the cylinder. If it's cockeyed, it's obviously not going to look very good. So I'm going to attach this one end with my finger, and then I'm just going to curl it back and peel it off like so. This whole thing can attach with the adhesive backing on it. And one thing you may want to use also is a burnishing tool to make sure that your edge is very, very well secured to the blank. If you don't have a burnishing tool, you can use a pen or anything else that's just very, very smooth, and make sure that this is pressed onto the blank. The one thing you do not want to do is you do not want to then come back over this with alcohol, because you're going to have a big, big risk of smearing or smudging any of the ink that's on here. So if you are going to go back over it with a cloth, make sure that it's completely dry cloth and clean cloth, and go over that like that. Now the beaver metal glass sticker is actually printed on a piece of mylar, and the edges that you're going to receive are actually not that good because they come from the mylar factory, and there's actually a little bit of debris that's in here. We're going to give you 2 with your kit just in case you mess one up. You've got the second one. This text right here, like the 8-foot 5-way text, is essentially your indicator, and that's what you're going to use to make sure that you put it on the blank parallel. The first thing you want to do is you want to expose a nice clean edge of mylar, and you can just do that with a pair of scissors. And I just cut that dirty edge off from the factory, and now I'm going to cut the other side. It's really okay if it's not too straight because it's clear. It really isn't going to be too much of a problem. Now if you take a pair of scissors, there's a little cut on here. We made it very easy for you to get to your label. You can just grab that piece right there, and what I like to do is I like to come underneath the label all the way to this side over here because I'm right-handed. I'm going to pull it off, and then I'm going to stick this one end, which is the left side, and I'm just going to hold that with my finger. When I lay it down, it's going to allow me with the tweezers to adjust this to make sure that I get it straight. If it's cockeyed or anything like that, like this, I can adjust it with the tweezers. So in this case, I'm going to set it down, make sure it's lined up, and again I'm going to use this 8-foot 5-way indicator. That's what I'm going to use to make sure that I'm straight. Because the beaver metal glass is cursive, it's kind of hard to judge, so you want to use that as your straight line. All I'm going to do is just push that down with my finger, and I'm going to wrap it around on both edges. I'm going to start in the middle and I'm going to work out. That way I get any bubbles out of there. I'm going to take a lint-free cloth and I'm going to press it down, and I'm going to push and squeegee that label right on nice and tight. Now, fiberglass is not as strong as graphite. If you try to squeegee this or push it and you hold it up in the air and you really push hard, believe it or not, you can cause a failure. So you want to make sure that you got it nice and strong and set down on a flat surface so that when you push on this, you're not going to have any risk of breaking the tube. And there you go. One other tip we want to show you, especially if you're going to be wrapping with silk, is that if you get a stock guide, whether you purchase the guide from us or from Mudhole or any other tackle supply company, the guide foot has a pretty good sized step right there. So when you're trying to wrap your thread up onto the foot, sometimes you can't make the step. So what you have to do is you have to file that off and make that taper less abrupt. One way is to hold the guide and use the guide against the file like this. The other way is you hold the guide and move the file, or you can use a rotary tool with an abrasive tip and sand it off that way.